Welcome to Graeme Codrington's Future of Work podcast. This is episode 2. We're going to talk about the economy and what we expect for 2021. When we're thinking about the future of work, we might be thinking about a decade or more from now with all of the amazing technologies and disruptive forces coming our way. But of course, we also might just be thinking about the next few weeks and months as we look ahead to what we expect to happen in the near future. And that's where I want to go with this episode. I want to think about what we've learnt about the economy and our industries from a year of COVID in 2020 and think about what that might mean as we look ahead and planning for 2021. In the next few weeks, countries around the world are going to be releasing their GDP numbers for 2020. And it's going to be a lot of red ink all over the place. I mean, obviously, the world economy and countries' economies have really suffered because of the COVID crisis. But those numbers are going to be largely meaningless because a single top-line number of how much the overall economy is contracted is not going to tell the story of the variance between different industries. Let's say, for example, your country's GDP contracted by 5%, but you're in the tourism or the hospitality or the entertainment industry. You're a musician or an artist or an actor in the theatre. You're an airline. Well, 5%, you'd be very happy if you were only 5% down. You're probably 80 or 90% down. Some companies, some industries have been devastated, and much more than that top line number is going to say. On the flip side, though, and the reason why having a whole chunk of your economy properly devastated, we still probably, most countries are not going to get to double-digit negatives. They are going to be 5, 6, 7%. That's the expectation around the world. Well, why is that? It's actually because some industries have had their best years ever. And I'm not joking about that. There are some companies that have had better years than they've ever had, and some have had better years than they've seen in decades. I mean, think through which of these you expect to see on that list. I mean, obviously, you can look at e-commerce and companies that are doing home deliveries of various goods. You can imagine that they've had a really good year. Where I live and work in South Africa, one of the big supermarket chains, which was not one of the high-end ones, a group called ShopRite Checkers, which is very mass-market mainstream. They, in December 2019, they launched a home delivery service called 6060. Very clever concept, basically a very limited range of goods that you could purchase, so not the entire catalog, on an app. And the 6060 was that basically it should take you 60 seconds to do an order and no more than 60 minutes to have that order delivered. And I won't go into details. It was a very clever marketing plan and a very clever business model. And it was working in January and February of 2020. And then, of course, lockdown hit and it just took off. And it has gone gangbusters the whole year. It was just perfect. It's meant to be for the things, not to do a sort of a full weekly or monthly shop, but the in-between times where you just suddenly realize you've run out of something and you need it 60/60. And it's really, really worked well for them. Lots of companies in that space, companies like Amazon and others, Alibaba across in Asia, have all had brilliant years. And for most of those, they were on an upward trajectory anyway, so therefore by default, they've had their best years ever. I think we can also add to that companies that were involved in technology, in home automation, in the type of computer ware that people needed at home. Laptops, for example, lighting, cameras, webcams. Companies that were installing fiber to the home. Companies that are data companies. So all the telecom companies. They've done brilliantly. And of course, many of these companies have also, at the same time as increasing their customer base and increasing the amount of money that they got in, they've also reduced their costs. Some of them were super innovative. The fiber company that provides fiber to my home, which is now my home office, Cool Ideas. Let me give them a call out. They shout out. They did brilliantly. Back in April, when we realized that lockdown was going to be with us for a while, I got an email saying, as a customer of Cool Ideas, we realize, as well as you realize, that lockdown is here for a while. You're going to be using more data. You're going to want that data to be faster. So we are upgrading you at no cost to you. We are upgrading you to the next package up. And the way their packages worked is that basically you doubled your speed and you doubled your cap if you had one. So you got double the amount of data at double the speed. Brilliant. Now, there was a bit of fine print. And they didn't try and hide the fine print. So I don't say fine print in that they were hiding it. They then said, this will last for 3 months. So you'll get it for April, May, and June, and then it will be over. And if you want to go back to your previous package, just let us know, and you'll go back to your previous package. If, however, at the end of June, you feel that you need the upgraded package, well, then, of course, you will need to start paying us some more. So they didn't hide it. Everybody understood what they were doing. They were trying to get us used to the bigger packages, and we all got used to the bigger packages. Of course we did. And that meant that at very little cost to them, they were able to upsell a massive customer base. Brilliant, genius, and I was more than happy to not just stay on the contract they bumped me up to, but bump up again and even again, actually. I've got a 1 gig line now at home. I'm loving it. 970 megabytes per second down. It's wonderful. I love it. So data, telecoms, fiber, all of those companies, I think, did really well. Here's one you might not have thought of. Veterinarians, vets. I've got a few friends, actually, who are vets. And they tell me that it has been a boom year in 2020 for pet ownership. Not only have more people got new pets, I'm one of those as well. We got a new puppy last year. But also people have had more time with their pets. They have connected and bonded more with their pets. And in most instances, therefore, have spent more money on their pets than they have before. A good friend of mine tells me that his vet practice is 30% up on the previous year. 30% up. Brilliant. Well done to them. Then, of course, we could look at some forms of entertainment. So I'm thinking Netflix here, of course. And in that mix, we can throw in Disney Plus, because Disney went even further than Netflix. Of course, Netflix were perfectly set up for this, and we've all caught up on our Netflix backlog, I suppose. But Disney Plus was a little bit behind, right? So Disney has been gathering a whole lot of assets, but has largely been focused on delivering those assets to the lucrative cable channels and into the cinema. And of course, that's not possible this year. And Disney, in December, announced that they had made the decision to accelerate something that was going to be happening over this decade, to accelerate it with immediate effect, to focus most of their energy on going into streaming. You see, what Disney realized, and what Netflix was already set up to take advantage of, is that the market has already changed. COVID hasn't just accelerated the fact that we are now a lot more comfortable and confident and even excited to consume really high quality products, entertainment products in our homes. It's not just that it's an acceleration. We have made the shift. And so Disney mustn't take 5 to 10 years to make that shift. They can make it instantly along with us. And they can now feed the beast. that COVID has created. The beast being our demand for streaming entertainment in our homes. And so, yeah, Disney Plus has made the shift. And of course, everybody else will follow because it just makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't want to therefore be a theatre owner, a physical theatre owner, because that is the acceleration of the demise of theatre is now going to just increase. And they're going to have to do something spectacular to get us back into their cinemas because we realize it's not a great experience. You know, you're sitting in a dirty seat with somebody else's old stale popcorn and people chewing and talking behind you and interrupted by cell phone ringing, and you can get COVID at the moment. So they're going to have to do something special to get us back to cinemas. Am I making sense to you as you think about this, that there are a lot of companies that have done their best years ever? There's also another list of companies that have done way better than they would have expected to if you had asked them at the start of lockdown. If on day one of lockdown you had asked companies, how do you think this is going to work for you? A lot of companies would have said, we're going to be devastated. And yet they haven't been. So I'm thinking of banks and insurance companies and most financial services companies have actually done reasonably well. We still need banking services. We've still kept our insurance up. Some of these insurance companies have given us a rebate on our premiums, but not a lot. And the rebate on the premiums has been much less than the reduction in the payouts that they've got. We're not having car accidents. We're not having burglaries. There is much less outflow from insurance companies with pretty much the same inflow. If you're in a country where you've got to buy private medical insurance, for example, they've also had a reasonably good year. I want to be sensitive in how I explain this, but let's be honest. COVID is not it's not an expensive disease. You know, it's not like cancer where it lasts for years and years and years and there's massive costs involved in the care. Yes, of course, if you get a really bad case of COVID, you maybe have to be in hospital for a few weeks. There's a ventilator involved and things like that. So there are costs involved. And I realize, of course, that people have lost loved ones during COVID. So I'm not trying to be insensitive. But from the perspective of the medical cost, it's not on an individual person-by-person basis. It's not a hugely expensive disease that's got ongoing long-term costs involved. And so medical insurance and medical aid companies have saved a lot of money during the year because a lot of us have put off our normal medical expenses. We haven't gone to the dentist as much. We haven't got our eyes checked this year. We've delayed elective surgeries. And we haven't then incurred all of those costs, but they haven't, again, they might have reduced our premiums a little bit, but probably not much. So they've done well. Certain media companies have done very well. We've all been consuming news, and some media companies have been able to capitalize on that. Private education, online education, anybody who's in ed tech, education technology, has been doing brilliantly. I've got some mining clients. They've had great years because commodities have increased in price during the year because of demand. And of course, towards the end of the year, those pharmaceutical companies that were involved in vaccine production and in other things related to COVID obviously have had brilliant years. A lot of companies, in addition to that, have been able to strip out massive amounts of costs. Some in not such good ways. They've got rid of staff and so on. And I'm not a huge fan of those companies that did that without trying at least to be loyal to their staff. But most companies have been able to strip out costs. And I think that we are going to see, as we head into 2021, maybe a lot more companies than you think, maybe a lot more industries than you initially imagine are going to come out of this COVID space in a much better place than they might have expected. I think it's just a fascinating thought. Now, of course, you might be asking, so what's all of this about, Graeme? Why are we having this conversation as a future of work conversation? Well, I suppose part of the answer to that is to say, well, I really hope you're in the right industry in 2021. Because I think we're going to have a similar story throughout 2021. So that's no help to you if you own a restaurant or a hotel or you're an airline, because I don't see your industries recovering. And yeah, I'm not here to wave a magic wand or to tell you it's all going to be okay. I think the industries that battled in 2020 are going to battle again in 2021. But whether you're in an industry that has, through no fault of your own, been decimated, or whether you're in one of the other industries that had a good year or even a great year in 2020, I think that the companies that did the best, the companies that did better than the rest in their industries, did four things. And this is the point of the conversation. So now that you've got in your head that you can take out the word devastated for the whole economy. There were lots of companies that did really well in 2020. Some just because they were lucky, they happened to be in the right industry. It's not because they've got clever people in charge. Just like those people who were devastated might not be because they made bad decisions, they're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But those companies that did better than others, those hotels, for example, that made a shift quickly. And I know one hotel group that very early on in May and June changed their bedrooms into remote offices and said to people, you can come and hire an office for a few days or a few weeks or a few months at a time. And you get everything you need in terms of being in a location, getting service, being COVID isolated, but you get an office. I heard hotels who, over the Christmas period, said that they would host a family in a isolated bubble in a hotel room, and you would get the hotel chef and you would get the service you might have expected at a restaurant, but in this isolated space. Again, not everybody could do that, but those were reasonably clever ideas that some companies which otherwise were devastated were able to put in place. And whether you were able to do that in a way that saved your year and got you to the economic levels you were hoping for, or whether it's just helped you scrape through, there are four things that companies did. And that is, they were adaptive, they were responsive, they were resilient, and they were innovative. And I think those are four words that you can take into 2021. Whether you're in an industry that's looking at a bleak year, or whether you're in an industry that was flying in 2020 and you want to continue to fly in 2021. These four things you need to do. You need to be adaptive. By adaptive, I mean, you need to build adaptability into your DNA. Being adaptive doesn't just mean you change when you hit a moment that requires change. Adaptability is a mindset. It's a DNA setting, if you like. It's a genetic part of you which allows you to shift and adjust all the time. It's not a change management process that takes you 3 years to plan for and 2 years to implement. And then it's done, kind of like a SAP implementation or something, that's done over a half-decade period. That's a business project. That's a change management project. Being adaptive is about building a structure, building systems and processes and procedures, building the DNA of your people, the culture of your organization in such a way that you can be responsive to change, that you can adapt and adjust as things happen. Now, we're going to come back to this over the course of this podcast to have a look at examples of companies that are adaptive, to look at what an adaptive culture actually looks like. It includes things like distributed decision making, like flattened hierarchies, like a culture of experimentation. Those are good examples of what adaptive cultures look like. But we're going to dig into detail. We're going to look at examples. We're going to talk about what it means to be adaptive. Secondly, they need to be responsive. And this has got to do with speed. This has got to do with, if you are adaptive, you've still got to have your foot on the accelerator. You've got to be able to scan the horizon, to know what's coming, to identify the difference between a fad and a trend, to identify something that is going to have a massive impact on you, to look at both the urgent and important stuff, and then make decisions quickly. And you've got to have built, again, you've got to have built systems and structures and processes that allow you to respond at speed, do things at speed. The third thing that companies did was they were resilient. And by resilience, I mean that they looked after their people. I talked about in many of my presentations during 2020, I talked about what I called finding your marathon pace. I was due to run the London Marathon in April. It was going to be my first big international marathon. And in preparing for it, I was asking people who have run marathons before to give me their insights. And every single seasoned runner I spoke to gave me the same advice, without exception. And without fail, it was the same advice. So if you're a seasoned runner, you'll know what they told me. Don't start too quickly. You've trained, you feel fit, you're excited. The gun goes off in Greenwich and there's thousands of runners around you. There's thousands of people lining the streets. There's music blaring. And it's so exciting. I mean, even for some person like me who's, only looking to do a marathon in over 5 hours, so I'm plodding along at the back of the field, still feel like you're at the Olympics, I guess. And so there's a danger, you think that you can do better than you can. So you rush out of the race and you run it at faster pace than you should. That catches up to you. Not at the 10K mark, not at the half marathon mark. It catches up to you at about the 32 kilometer mark. This is a well-known issue in marathon running where you literally just hit the wall and your body can't go further. I'm very nervous for many companies that spent 2020 being productive, that got to the end of the year and said to their staff, well done, everybody. We didn't think we could do this, but we've done it. And well done, everybody. You've worked so hard. I'm so proud of you. And everybody was shattered, beyond exhausted, wasted by the year. And because COVID hasn't gone away, we didn't really get a break. We come back in January and we haven't really refreshed. We haven't revived ourselves. And you kind of now pull out the whip again and you say to people, right, let's go again. Let's go at that pace. And I suspect that in February or March, especially if we have a second wave and a big surge and we've got more lockdowns at the beginning of 2021, I'm very nervous that we hit the 32K mark, we hit the wall. Your people just collapse. I'm so nervous that people might die of heart attacks in 2021. Forget COVID, other stress-related illnesses coming in. So look after your people, look after yourself, be resilient. And resilience, again, we're going to come back to each of these themes on this podcast. But resilience has got to do with your mindfulness and with energy management and with empathy and emotional intelligence. Be resilient. And then finally, be innovative. I've given you examples already from Disney Plus and others of companies that were innovative, that are seeing the opportunity, the moment for innovation to be here. We've been talking about innovation for a decade or more in our companies. Now's the time to deliver. And if you've built an innovation machine, now you've got to unleash it and unlock it and let it fly. And if you haven't yet perfected your innovation machine, and that's a strong statement, I'm not sure I know of any of my clients who've perfected their innovation machine, but if you haven't yet even got an innovation engine going, now is a great time. 2 years ago was a better time, but hey, now is the second best time. And again, we will talk about what an culture of innovation looks like on this podcast and what it takes. What are some of the companies that are getting innovation on demand? What are they doing? And what can we learn from them? Now more than ever, we need to be able to do that. So that's why I wanted to talk about the economy. I don't think it's all doom and gloom. Again, apologies if it is doom and gloom for you personally in your industry. But even if you are in a tough industry and a doom and gloom space, be more adaptive, be more responsive, be more resilient, be more innovative. I can't promise you it's a miracle cure, but you will be better off than if you don't do those things. And if you're in a space where you're in an industry that did really well in 2020 and you want to do even better in 2021, be adaptive, be responsive, be resilient, be innovative. And if you want to know exactly what that means, if you want to know what each of those 4 things entail, if you want to get examples of companies that are doing those 4 things that we can learn from, well, then you're in the right place. This is what the Future of Work podcast is about. It's about other things as well, but we're going to come back to those themes over and over again and hopefully help you to navigate through the turbulent times that lie ahead of us. So thank you for joining me in episode 2 of Graeme Codrington's Future of Work podcast. If this sounds like something that's going to be useful to you, please subscribe. So that you can get the next episode and the episode after that as soon as I release it, and it just comes into your podcast app and into your stream. Please share this information with your friends, with your colleagues. Let's share the love here. If you feel that this is something that's going to be useful, then share it around. And if you have the time, I would really appreciate you going onto your favorite podcast platform and rating the show. I know that we've only had one introductory episode in this one, but if you're already convinced that this sounds like something worth listening to, your ratings and your comments on the podcast, on your podcast platform of choice, will be really helpful to me. So all the best for 2021, and I'll see you in episode 3.